Good afternoon. I will be talking today about the importance of carbohydrates, which are commonly uh, debated in media and in healthcare news. Carbohydrates carry a lot of misconceptions and often carry bad reputation. So I'm going to explain the basic concepts and give some scientific evidence how carbohydrates work in our bodies and why are they important as macronutrients. Carbohydrates are generally divided into, I'm trying to minimize chemistry as much as possible, but I do have to use some chemistry. Carbohydrates are made of basically carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's why the name is carbohydrate is from water. Basically, it's CH2O multiplied by number n, which varies. You don't need to. We don't need to go into more details than that. Uh, the carbohydrates can be simple, what commonly named as sugars, which are found in fruits, milk. Actually, milk sugar, yeah, it's considered simple sugar. And fruits, fructose, and our blood sugar, which is glucose, is also a simple sugar. What I'm going to focus in this speed is the complex carbohydrates, which are divided into starches or amylose, which what we use for energy, and fibers, which we don't use ourselves because we cannot digest, but they do have a lot of nutritional benefits beyond their uh, value. So they're considered as functional foods. I will talk about both. Starches are the main source of glucose in our diet, especially if you are, if you go into old world civilizations. So I'm going to talk about where do starches come from and what is the number one controversy that or is misunderstood is starches are often found in plant. Well, they're always found in plant. We don't find starches in animals. Period. You don't. They don't exist. They are a form of stored carbohydrate in plants. And here is an image of the grain. On the left side, you see the whole grain, which is made of the bran, basically fiber and B vitamins, some protein as well. The yellow part is the endoplasm, which is the starch, and the internal part, which is the germ, which contains fat, fatty acids, and vitamin E. Normally, plant oils are made from germs. In complex carbohydrates, in the healthy one that are not processed, the whole grains are basically whole. You get the bran, the endoplasm, and the germ. So you get the fiber, the B vitamins, the starch, the protein, and the fat. While in white grains, such as white bread and processed complex carbohydrates, you get only the starch, which is a problem because they are void of the other nutrients, as you notice. Another example of how carbohydrates are manipulated is sugar, which is a simple carb, not a complex. It's mainly found, again, I told you, it's in fruits. It's also found on table sugar, uh, different type of sugar. You got monosaccharides and disaccharides, if you want to know the term. The fruit sugar is universally known as fructose. It is one or monosaccharide. The problem with the fruit is that if you remove the skin and the ingredient, the meat of the fruit, We remove the fibers, the vitamins, and the phytochemicals, and what's left is the sugar, which what you get in the fruit juice. In some nutrition books, or some nutrition, I should say, links, to be correct, they advertise that fruit juice can be a replacement for fruit. No, they are not, because fruit juice are void of the other compounds we find in fruits, which make them processed. Not so basically, the problem with carbohydrate is not the carbohydrate; it's whether they are processed or not. I will talk about more when as I go. So now let's go back to the main functions of carbohydrates. We have four main functions of carbohydrates that will be discussed in this lecture or presentation. They provide us energy. We'll talk about it briefly. They are important in conserving proteins, mainly muscle protein in our tissues, and they are important for fat metabolism. Surprise! In order to burn fat, you will need to have adequate intake of carbohydrate, and they are the main source of glucose, which is the prime fuel for the brain. Well, I've got to put some cellular elements here. This is a mitochondria. It looks like a sausage. And inside the mitochondria, you see inside the cell how glucose, which comes from our carb, whether they are complex carbohydrates, starch, or whether you eat it in fruits and or other type of simple sugar, they all at the end more or less convert to glucose in the body. Glucose enters the cell and goes into two pathways. The first one is outside the mitochondria, which is known as glycolysis, and it does not require oxygen. And the main use of glucose then element is to go into the mitochondria and get oxidized and produce a lot of energy known as ATP. Glucose is the only nutrient that can be used both with and without oxygen. Remember this. The only energy source that can be used without oxygen in us is glucose. It can be converted to for short period only, for short period, and that is important to know. And there are also one cell in the body that does not have mitochondria. It's the red blood cell. The red blood cell which carry our oxygen throughout the body, despite the fact they are the oxygen carrier via hemoglobin, they don't have mitochondria because they are not complete cells. They only rely on glycolysis. There is an error in the slide. I could not correct it. I did not correct it. It's glycolysis, not glycosis. And that is used in red blood cells, strictly in red blood cells. Carbohydrates get stored in our body. We do not have starch in our body. We are not potato, we are not tubers, we are not wheat, barley, or lentil, but we have a way to synthesize a complex carbohydrate called glycogen. Comes from Greek, which means source of sugar, or sugar, sugar, gen is source. It's mainly stored in the liver and in the muscle. The difference is that the muscle glycogen is used by the muscle. So if you want to exercise and have an optimal movement, and optimal, you go to the gym for exercise, weightlifting, and so forth, you have to have adequate glycogen in your muscle to provide that, to provide the first boost of glucose. Additionally, if your blood sugar goes low in the body, in the blood, your glucose in your glycogen in the liver is breaks down and generates glucose. So glycogen in the liver is the only one that can break down to glucose and is released to the blood and is used by the muscles. So basically, it's a survival mechanism. This is controlled by complex hormones, which I will be talking about in another topic. For your information, and due to the importance of carbohydrates, there are 6 hormones involved in carbohydrates metabolism. Another important factor about makes carbohydrate very essential for us. In order to keep your muscle protein from being wasted, you need to have adequate carbohydrate intake in your body. If you don't, guess what? Your muscle protein will begin slowly to degrade and generate glucose, like it or not. And your brain will demand that. Your brain will send a message to your adrenal glands to make a hormone called cortisol, and that hormone is extremely important. Uh, and this hormone, one of the many functions is to make sure that your blood glucose does not go down during starvation or during low and carb intake. It will degrade your muscles to make glucose for the brain. You cannot mess with your brain. Okay? That is called, if you want, the term is called gluconeogenesis, synthesis or making of glucose from non-carbohydrates, mainly amino acids. So you're going to end up losing muscle. So in order not to lose muscles, make sure you have adequate intake of your carb. Not overdo it. Now, if you overdo carbohydrate intake, or you overdo the consumption of the wrong carbohydrates, you will stimulate too much of insulin, which is the main hormone required for storing carbohydrates. In that case, if you make too much insulin, you will end up gaining weight on the long run, and that is one major reason why insulin is nicknamed the storage hormone. And these 2 hormones I mentioned in this slides, insulin and cortisol, are the 2 most complex hormones in the human body. And they are extremely essential for life. You cannot live without either of these hormones. Now, this is a very I'll try to simplify it. And again, there is some chemistry involved. Some of you who are into health science and or into gym and physiology and physical therapy and kinesiology know the famous statement, fat burns in the flame or the furnace of carbohydrate, which is very much true. So in order for fat to be burned, we know that excess carbohydrates can be stored as fat. You cannot make a unlimited amount of glycogen, so you will end up too much carbohydrate, you're going to have a fat in your body. Guess what? Even excess protein can be stored as fat. You cannot skip that. So now, if you want to burn fat, fat is a great source of energy. Fat provides 2.5 more energy per 1 gram than carbohydrate. So if 1 gram of carbohydrate provides 4 calories, or 4 kilocalories to be proper, 1 gram of lipid fatty acid provide 9 kilocalories. So that's 1.25. You do the math. Or 1.20. Sorry, 2.20. 2.21. I teach math, by the way. I've got multiple degrees. So going back to this slide, this is carbohydrate going into pyruvate, which is non-aerobic. This is in the cytoplasm, and that does not require oxygen. When it goes into the mitochondria, it goes into a famous cycle called Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle. Now, if you notice on the right side, there is beta oxidation. Beta oxidation is oxidation of fatty acids. In order for fatty acids to be oxidized fully and generate a lot of energy and enter Krebs cycle, you need a chemical called oxaloacetate. I don't expect you to memorize it unless you are a biochemistry student, whatever field you are taking. You will have to learn about oxaloacetate. It's known as anapletoric or supplier of, it's basically what makes carbohydrates very important. Because if you don't have enough carbohydrate, you run out of oxaloacetate. It's not shown here, it is in the cycle, and your fat cannot be oxidized fully, and they go into the second round. Surprise, they break down to make ketone bodies. And now everybody is going to cheer up. Well, good then. Yes, but not so good. When you make ketone bodies, when you starve, when you don't have adequate intake of carbohydrate, the happy side is that you will lose weight. The unhappy side is that you will also lose protein. Remember, no carb, you're gonna make, because fat cannot, and I repeat, fatty acid cannot convert to glucose. Only glycogen in the liver and amino acids. Amino acids, protein, can't convert to glucose. Which organ demands glucose? The brain. Even if you are starving, or even if you're on a keto diet, your brain will demand glucose. If you want to try to live without glucose, imagine yourself with blood sugar less than 50 or 40 milligram per deciliter. You will be on the floor in no time. You basically pass out. If your blood sugar goes below 20, you are at risk of having permanent brain damage and even possibly death. We don't want to go there. Okay, so the bottom line is ketones are good to lose weight. You can go on keto diet. And important to mention, if you listen to me, I'm not giving you medical or dietary advice. If you want to follow a special diet, talk to your health care provider. Consult your health care provider, and you must also have lab tests. You need, especially if you're going to go on one of those diet like ketone diet or starvation, intermittent fasting, or whatever diet you like. And I'm not going to go there. You will need medical follow-up and lab testing. It can have severe side effect. Lastly, the dangerous part of ketones happen when your carbohydrates are impaired metabolically. This is commonly found when insulin is not being produced, known as diabetes mellitus or type 1 diabetes. Then, if you don't make insulin, ketone bodies, fat breakdown, and protein breakdown will basically terminate you. You will end up melting away your fat and protein in the urine. You make a lot of ketone bodies, and you make a lot of glucose in the blood, and the person will eventually lose a lot of weight and end in a coma if insulin is not injected, which will lead to the the person demise or death. Don't mix ketone synthesis, which can happen and can have health benefits, but watch out, you cannot live on ketone bodies for life. I have a very important. It's only used temporarily. On the other side, ketoacidosis is a life-threatening condition associated with insulin deficiency. And if you starve for weeks, prolonged starvation for weeks, you will also develop ketoacidosis. Either way, you will not be able to survive in that case. The importance of carbohydrate as a fuel for the brain and for red blood cells. I already discussed with you that red blood cells can only use glucose. They cannot use fatty acids, they cannot use amino acids because they don't have mitochondria. Done. The brain, I call the brain the emperor. It is the emperor of the body. It is the king, commander of chief, whatever you want to call it. Um, the brain is an oxygen and glucose guzzler. So if you are taking an exam, let's say you're doing a calculus exam, your brain consumes 20% of your glucose and over 25% of your oxygen during that exam. Hint, if you are a student and you want to get a good grade, make sure you have adequate carbohydrate intake to supply that with your brain, to your brain. Okay? If your brain doesn't get glucose, it will end up making it. It will force you to make it by degrading your muscle protein, and that is life-sustaining or life-saving condition, as happen when we fast or we don't eat adequate carbohydrate. Other important functions of carbohydrates include: in the body, carbohydrates are found in the DNA and RNA. If you look at the slide here, you see the hexagon, the five-side polygon is a sugar called either ribose or deoxyribose, depending if it's an RNA or DNA. It's also found in ATP, which is the currency of energy. Carbohydrates are important part of cell membrane, found in cell membrane, often associated with protein and lipids. And in cell membrane, they are important for cell identification and immune system. So basically, the cells are identified via certain protein and carb attached together, known as glycoproteins. Another example of that is blood types. A, B, and O are basically carbohydrates, not protein. I mean, glycoprotein, the carbohydrates are involved in blood typing. They're also involved in cancer immunology. Certain hormones, especially pituitary hormones, contain carbohydrates. I'm not going to go into that more than that. And one thing I did not add, milk, which is produced by the female mammary gland. That's what's called mammary gland, not the breast. The breast is the muscle. Is even the woman milk, it contains carbohydrate called lactose, which feeds the offsprings. Good carb that we consume in food are found in minimally processed, high fiber, nutritious foods, which come. Remember, when I showed you the grain, the full grain, it comes with healthy fat, B vitamins, minerals, and proteins. So you will have an assembly of many nutrients in these. If you eat, for example, a lentil soup, or if you eat a quinoa or barley or mixed, within limit, of course. The great source of these elements, including magnesium, which is hard to obtain in Western diet. It's a mineral and it's hard to obtain in Western diet. Carbohydrates have very great influence on mood. You've got the good carb and the bad carb. The good carb raises your serotonin, which makes you relaxed, happy, and even help you sleep. Bad carbs raises your dopamine. Now, here's the importance about dopamine. Dopamine is essential, but the way bad carbs work with dopamine is addictive. So dopamine is you can't live without dopamine. It's important chemical in the brain. But when you eat a candy bar, most likely, especially if you are in a bad mood, you are going to crave another candy bar, right? And that is a dopamine cycle. They even have been studies on mice and rats. They provided the rat and the mice with two bags of white powders. The first one is sugar, simple sugar, table sugar, which is sucrose, by the way, and or high fructose corn syrup, which I will not go into this more than that. And with another sugar, another bag full of white material, which I guess you know what it is. It's cocaine. Guess what? The rats, craved the sugar, favored the sugar over the cocaine. This is why sugar has a little nickname called little cocaine. It may not kill you quickly. Cocaine is very dangerous and it's considered criminal activity and it can kill you. But excess consumption of sugar will have significant and detrimental health benefit. I'm talking about simple sugar from refined carbohydrate. We're going to talk about carbohydrates as functional food. When I say functional foods are foods that have health benefits, not necessarily in nutrients. Fibers are not used, they don't go into our system. They often go into our waste in stool. We excrete them. But throughout the process of making and excreting stool or feces, the fibers go into a lot of chemical processes in the intestines, in the colon mainly, which make them very important to cover. And generally speaking, the fibers are divided into two types. Uh, Most likely, if you eat a diet that is healthy, and you can look at the picture here, are example of healthy carb. If you eat salads, grains, legumes, mixed, you will get them both. You can separate, so you can have a lentil soup with quinoa or with the broccoli or with kale or onion, and you will get both soluble and insoluble fiber. First importance rule of fibers is they are extremely essential for bowel movement. To have a regular bowel movement to cleanse your colon, you need to have an adequate fiber intake. Western diet is low in fiber. Now, certain countries in developed world, surprise, they sometimes have high fiber intake, and I will touch base on it by the end. They regulate fullness or satiety. They make you full. Why? Because if you have, let's take white bread versus a thick, hearty, whole grain bread. The whole grain bread, and I'll show you how to identify it, will provide the fiber and the ingredients that will make you full. You eat one slice, of course, you add something like cheese or peanut butter or whatever or on the bread, and that will make the spike of your plasma glucose slower. It will lower down the spike of plasma glucose and lower down the spike of insulin, which both are essential for satiety. Well, if you have a quick intake of white bread or candy bar or fruit juice, that will lead to faster spike in glucose and insulin, which will drop second, and you will have craving. You will need more. So that's why they're called empty calories. Also, fiber, notably soluble fibers, are important for eliminating cholesterol too. Cholesterol is mainly eliminated, removed from the body via bowel movement. If you don't have fiber, if you're chronically constipated, you are at risk of well, elevated cholesterol as well. Plus, chronic constipation will cause disease of the colon and is a risk of, guess what, colon cancer. So, adequate intake of fiber are essential to reduce the risk of colon cancer. 50% of cases of colon cancer are preventable. Fibers are considered often as prebiotics. They feed the good bacteria in our colon, which we often call probiotic. We can get it from fermented food, like sauerkraut or yogurt. The prebiotics are what feeds them. So if you have a kale salad with a glass of Greek yogurt, you will have both probiotic, which is the Greek yogurt, the bacteria, and prebiotic, which is the salad. It's food. But if you have a candy bar, guess what? You feed the bad bacteria in your colon. Good carb feeds the good bacteria, the fiber. The bad carb feeds the bad bacteria, and you don't want that. So, adequate intake of fiber will help balance our mood because the intestines make serotonin. The intestine, they make their own serotonin, which is involved in mood. They often called the second brain. The intestines or the gut is also involved in immunity. So adequate intake of fiber will help regulate our immune system and will lower the risk of inflammation. So you reduce your risk of old age disease. You name it. There have been numerous studies to show all major old age diseases, be it Alzheimer, heart disease, cancer, uh, diabetes type 2, etc., are linked to imbalance in the microbe in the intestine, in the colon. Very important. So, what is the take-home message from this? I shouldn't say lecture. I'm a professor slash teacher, so I know I have the mode of being a professor like. I'll try to ease that tone down, but it takes time. This is my second recording. And before I finish, I ask you please, if you like my information, to subscribe, share, and click like. Like, so my recordings will go to other people, and I would love to read your comments. So, now, why did I say obtain enough fibers but not too much? Because too much of anything can be bad for you. Even water, even oxygen, you can't have too much of it. So it's extremely rare in the United States or Canada or in the West to have too much fiber. But if you go to countries like Egypt or India, where meats are very expensive and considered as luxury food, many people cannot afford meat and they eat beans, legumes, grains 5 times a day. Now, here's the flip side of this. Yes, they are healthy, but too much fiber will take away, I'm saying too much, will chelate, will remove metals or minerals from your diet. So if you want to have a steak, which is high in iron, and you want the optimal absorption of iron from your steak, Don't have a steak and have a large bowl of oatmeal next to it. Now, I'm not saying that the oatmeal is bad or the steak is bad, but too much of the oat or too much of the fiber can bind to the iron in the steak, some of it, especially if you take it as pills. If you take an iron pill or magnesium pill, to summarize this, I know I talk too much. Just eat your limit of fiber, but make sure you eat your fiber. If you eat adequate intake of fiber, you will not have a problem with mineral deficiency. Okay, I'm talking about places like where people rarely eat meats. Meats are nutritious, they're highly nutritious, make no mistake about it, and their diet is fully loaded with carb 5 times a day because they are cheap. Aim for non-processed whole grains like oat, whole grain rice, wild rice, example, quinoa, cracked wheat, burgle or bulgur, etc. Legumes are a great source of nutrients, including beans, lentils, peas, peanuts, and soy. They all are classified as legumes. And whole fruits, not peeled fruit. Well, I'm not talking about banana. You can't eat the skin of the banana. But if you're going to have an apple, make sure you wash the apple, but eat it with the skin. Try to include the skin of the fruit. Also, you can have potato and tubers, which are not listed here, and carrots. If you consume potato, make sure you consume potato with the skin, because the skin of the potato is where the fiber and the protein is under the skin. If you remove the skin, you are eliminating two compounds, fiber and protein, from the potato. Dairy products have been much controversy. They're fine in moderation. Dairy provide us with a sugar called lactose, which will eventually convert to glucose in our body. If you are lactose intolerant, there are solutions to that. Basically, you can get lactose-free dairy or non-animal dairies like soy milk or nut milks. I'm an advocate for cow milk if the cow is humanely fed and properly treated, basically grass-fed. Always include with your carbs. So if you want to have a slight slice of bread, talking whole wheat bread or whole grain bread, make sure you put something on it, whether it's a slice of cheese or peanut butter or a piece of meat or whatever. So mix your carb with protein and fat. You will get a best optimal benefit and more nutrients, and you will have better effect on your fullness, on your satiety, and slow rise in your plasma glucose. Try to include vegetables and fruits as much as possible. The more the merrier, especially vegetables, and follow the color wheels. The more colorful your plate, the better it is. Always drink water, not necessarily with the food, but between meals, hydration. And if you go on a low carb diet or on a keto diet or any diet, you need more water. Surprise. The stricter the diet you have, the more important that you drink adequate amount of water. What about processed carbohydrates? Candy bars, ice cream, donuts, you name it, fruit juice, Coca-Cola. Well, they're not good for you, right? We know that. Does it mean that we should never, ever, ever have them? No. We are humans. And it is not It's unhuman to to be other way. So this make sure you do that on occasions. Let's say on a Saturday night or on 1 day per week, or if there's a party happening, well, birthday party or Halloween party or Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it is, and you got cake or ice cream or what. My favorite are chocolate ice cream with nuts in it, and I add nuts because remember the nuts will uh, improve the nutrition of the ice cream. And also, you can replace ice cream with custard. Custard is higher in egg yolk. Egg yolk is fat. Guess what? It's better for you. Custard is better than ice cream and gelato. Just don't overdo it. Don't do it every day. You will end up paying the consequences. You will or may end up paying the consequences. Avoid drinks that are high in sugar, including fruit juices. Eat the whole fruit with the fiber. So here's a summary of the good carbs which I found for you. You get the starchy vegetables. Yes, they are good. And I'm talking if you eat one potato, not five. And follow the size, the portion size. So one potato should be the size of the palm of your hand. The whole grains and the legume. And I would say of this slide, the best and the most nutritious is the beans and the lentils and the soy. And fruits and veggies. Well, veggies that contain a lot of carbohydrates. Broccoli has carbohydrates. Tomato, celery, even onion, bell pepper, they do have some carbohydrates. You cannot skip carbohydrates. They are in the plant. Highly, minimally processed pasta that is made of whole grain. These are the ones that we should be watching out for. Candy bars, pastries, sugary stuff, all sugary drinks, even with the sweeteners, and the whites, including white breads and white rice. And if you peel the potato, if you take the skin of the potato out, it will be treated as white. If you deep fry the potato, it's no longer good carb. Okay? So when I say a potato, it has to be with the skin, preferably boiled or baked or in the oven. I end up with this slide to show you where to look for items. Well, obviously, if you're going to buy a bag of lentil and you read the ingredients, lentil, you are assured this is a high quality carbohydrate. If you buy a bag of barley or a bag of quinoa or a bag of whatever, just is made of just the element, pure, or you buy carrots or broccoli, you get in a full food, whole food. But if you want to look for bread, the bread is synthetic, is man-made. How do we know that the bread or the cereal is good for us or not? Well, there are a couple of ways. The complex way, which I don't include in this slide, I may do it in a different lecture, is to look at the nutritional ingredients and daily values. And with ingredients, it will say basically natural ingredients like oatmeal, steel cut oat, whole kernel of wheat or barley or you get my point. While in the processed one, you will have dozens of chemicals and added sugars, and you will have a lot less fiber in this in the whites in the process. But a lot simpler way, which is adopted in the United States, and I believe it's in Canada too, is to look for this logo. If you see this logo on the package, that means it's generally safe. So here's what say here. in the first one it says in the serving of whatever we have in is 8 grams of per serving, okay, of carb, of fiber. Remember here they're looking for the fiber, and in the next one you got the whole content. So basically, I'm not to make this simple. I would look for the logo. I would look for the logo. If you have 100%, that means it's a higher quality. It's a higher quality stamp. I don't have an example of a nutritional label to make you read. I will make a lecture at some point. I will make a presentation about reading nutritional label and nutritional values. I didn't want to complicate it. So in order to correct this, they say here how much of whole grain or how much is grains are in per serving. You got 8 grams, you get 47 grams. And in general, when it comes to fiber, your intake of fiber can go up to 40 grams per day. If you are a male, 36 grams per day if you are a female. If you go a little bit more, that is also accepted. Most white breads, most whites and cereals will have 1 gram of or less of fiber per slice. Candy bars and baked foods basically have no fiber in it, the same as fruit juice. They are void of fiber. So you cannot have a whole grain or you cannot have this logo on a bag of white bread. That doesn't exist. Okay, I would conclude this speech by this slide, and I want to thank you for your attention and your listening to me and your I value your feedback. So again, I'm just starting this. It's a long way. It's a long journey. I have a passion and I have tremendous amount of knowledge stored in me, and I would like to share it to help other people. I ask you please to comment, to like, subscribe, or and share the YouTube so it will be you beneficial to other people. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.